Good morning. What's up, Bones? How's it going? Another day in Happy Valley. Here we go. Today we get to talk about fronts, okay? In our last lesson, we talked about air masses, which is our bubbles of air that travel across our country, and they bring a certain type of weather to your area for a few days. Today, what we're going to see is what happens around the edges of these air masses, okay? And the boundary between two different air masses, or the edge of the air mass, or the front of the bubble of weather that is traveling, guess what it's called? It's called a front. The front of an air mass is called a front, okay? What's our saying here, Bones? It ain't rocket science, okay? So it's earth science. So it's meteorology. I'm on a roll. Anyway, sorry. All right, back to being serious. Anyway, so the front of these air masses, the front of these bubbles are called fronts, okay? Um, and at every single front, all right, you're going to get some sort of stormy weather because there's going to be a transition of weather from one kind to another, okay? So at a front, the warmer air will always rise above the cooler air and they kind of start fighting with each other. Okay, it doesn't last very long. It will last a day or two, and then it passes through your area and you'll have nice weather again. This happens all the time as these bubbles of air, or air masses that we learned in our last lesson, go through. Okay, the transition from one air mass to another, you get a little bit of stormy weather, which is why you get 3 or 4 days of nice weather, 1 or 2 days of stormy weather. 3 or 4 days of nice weather, 1 or 2 days of stormy weather. So along these fronts, okay, we get different kinds of cloud formations. We get different types of wind blowing, different types of precipitation, depending on the characteristics of the air that's going over you. The air pressure changes, which causes the wind to blow different speeds and the air pressures to change to allow different amounts of moisture in there. And we also get temperature changes. So a lot of the times you can actually see fronts coming in. So you can see this cloud. Okay. On the right-hand side here, this is probably a high-pressure system because remember, high pressure, happy weather, cold and dry. There's a lot of air in the area, but not a lot of moisture. Clouds bring water with them. Clouds have moisture. This is a low-pressure system over here. So this is a front, okay, of a new air mass coming in from the left-hand side here. All right, so sometimes you can actually really distinctly see where a front line is as these air masses travel through your area. Okay, there's 4 different fronts that we're going to focus on, and each has a certain symbol. And we're going to look at these symbols on a weather map so you know where the front of the air mass is, what type of weather that front is associated with, and what kind of weather it's going to bring in behind it. Because it's kind of like the front of a train. The train is going to carry in, okay, a certain type of air with it. And it's really easy to figure out. So here's our symbol for a cold front. Our cold front looks like icicles. I think they look like icicles. It's usually a blue symbol with triangles on it. Okay, so whichever way the triangles are pointing is telling us which direction that air is being pulled. Okay, a warm front, okay, is usually marked in red, and it kind of looks like little half suns, little half circles. So that's how I remember that it's a warm front, because they look like little suns that were cut in half. A stationary front, it has little triangles going one way and little suns going the other, or little icicles going one way and little suns on the other side. That's because the two air masses are fighting with each other and they're trying to push into each other. Okay, and they're kind of stationary. Stationary means you're standing still. And then we have an occluded front where the suns and the triangles, as I'm calling them, that's what the symbols look like to me, team up with each other. All right, and we get a certain kind of weather that's associated with that. So fronts bring in a little bit of stormy weather as we're transitioning from one type of air mass to another. So let's take a closer look at that transition now. All right, here we go, cold fronts. As I said, here's a cold front symbol, all right? That means the cold air is behind it, okay? So the triangles or the icicles or the cold front symbol, however you want to say it, is carrying cold air behind it like a train, okay? The front is the front of the train, it's the engine, okay? And it's pulling the cold air behind it. All right, so now what happens here is we get cumulus clouds form, and we get some heavy precipitation and thunderstorms as cold fronts move through our area. Okay, this is because, so here's our cold front right here. All right, we see the cold air or the cold bubble behind it is moving in the right-hand direction here. It's moving to the right. And what happens is as it moves in, it pushes up the warm air with the moisture in it. And when the cold air hits it, it starts to rain. Okay, because remember what cold air does to moisture in the air. Cold air, if there's moisture in the air and the cold air hits it, that water vapor will condense down into water liquid, and then we get rain. Okay, so this is what a cold front would do. We get some heavy precipitation and thunderstorms. Notice the front is right here. This is the front of the new air mass, and it's pulling cold air behind it. Okay, it's pulling the air bubble with it. Okay, and this is what the symbol looks like. So pretty simple. Okay, look for icicles, and you know cold air is behind the icicles. Then we have warm fronts. Okay, here's our symbol for a warm front. Okay. Our warm front looks like little half suns, and it's usually a red color, which kind of reminds me of warm weather, and that means the warm air is behind it. Okay, so here's our warm front here. The warm air is going to push the cold air out of here. Now, when this happens, the warm air it doesn't push it out of the way as easily as the cold front. It struggles a little bit more. So what we're going to get is some low-lying stratus clouds, and we're going to get a light precipitation. It's not going to be much just because the warm air is slowly moving up the cold air, causing it to rain a little bit. Until this transition goes through, you'll get a light precipitation that can last for a few hours or even maybe a day or two. Okay, so a warm front, again, but just remember, the warm air is behind the symbol. Okay, it's behind the symbol as it pushes through your area, but it's carrying the warm air from behind it. Okay, and our symbol is in front of the air mass. So we'll get some light precipitation with warm fronts. Just remember the symbol. It kind of looks like nice, warm little half suns. Then we get stationary fronts. All right, here comes the fight between warm air and cold air. All right, so what happens with the stationary front is both air masses stop against each other. Okay, neither one of them wants to budge. Okay, they want to be there at the same time. All right, this is going to cause clouds and a light precipitation for a long time. This is when you'll get rain for a couple, 2 or 3 days in a row, even maybe. Okay, because the warm air eventually is going to rise above the cold air, causing it to rain. So look here at this symbol here. Notice the triangles here are pointing to the right. The cold front symbol is pointing to the right, which means the cold air is being pulled this direction. The warm air doesn't want to go anywhere, so it's fighting back. So it's pushing back. So just like you've seen two rams in nature clash horns together to fight, this is what's happening when you get a stationary front. And so it doesn't want to move. It's a push of war instead of a tug of war. Okay, and it doesn't want to move, and it just kind of lingers over your area for a while. The cold air and warm air pushing up against each other. So since neither one is moving, it says it's staying stationary. For instance, if you have a stationary bike, that's one of those bikes that you just sit on in your living room or in the gym, and it doesn't go anywhere. You just spin the pedals and you spin the tire, and you just stay in one spot. You are stationary. Okay, so again, causes clouds with a light precipitation for a long time because neither front wants to go anywhere. All right, they're kind of fighting against each other. And then we get an occluded front. This is where we get a lot of heavy precipitation. Okay, this is basically when both the warm front and the cold front, the warm air and the cold air, team up with each other. Okay, and the warm air rises above the cold air to cause heavy precipitation in an area. All right, so now instead of fighting with each other, they're teaming up with each other. So okay, all of the cold air is advancing from here, causing clouds to develop, and it's going to pour rain. These are your big thunderstorms as the front teams up with each other to move across the country. Okay, so now these air masses, okay, move from the east, from the west to the east. All right, so let's take a look here. Here's a typical weather map that you would see on TV. All right, and there's a couple things that we can take a look at. Bones, do you remember what type of weather I said is associated with all fronts no matter what? I just talked about 4 of them, and every single one did something. What was it? That's right. It was some sort of rain, some sort of precipitation, some sort of stormy weather. So here we go. So here's a cold front here. All right, notice the icicles or triangles are facing this direction, facing to the east or southeast. All right, that means the cold air is being brought behind it. Remember, it's pulling the air behind with it. All right, so the cold air is moving to this area. We're going to get rain all along this symbol here. Okay, we have a warm front. Here's a bubble of warm air. There's a warm air mass heading up to the northeast this direction. So the warm air is here, and that's why we have our warm front symbol here. So it's going to be raining all along here too. So it's going to rain all through here, and it's going to rain all through here. Now, look at this symbol right here. It's a big L. Does everybody remember what the big L stands for? You remember? Low pressure. Low pressure. Remember the saying? Low pressure, lousy weather, warm and wet. Remember, warm is a figurative saying. The point is wet weather. You're going to get stormy weather. So they put this low pressure system here. Okay, so it's low pressure causing rain or precipitation all along this front and this front. So this makes sense that this is the center of the low pressure. So cold air is behind it. Okay, this is going to be a high pressure system back here, even though they don't have the H. Okay, and it's going to be nice once these few fronts go through the country. Okay, it's nice weather, warm weather down here as well. Okay, it's just raining along the two front lines. But this makes sense that you have a big L here on a weather map, low pressure system coming through, because fronts always bring stormy weather. Okay, now how long does it last? As I said before, air masses control the weather for a few days at a time. Okay, our air masses and our weather travels from California or the West Coast through the East Coast. All right. And the weather changes as new air masses move into different areas. At all of the fronts, we're going to get kind of stormy weather before the air masses settle over an area and provide nice weather for a couple days. These air masses are moved by something called westerly winds. Okay, we name a wind after where it's coming from. So since the wind blows from west to east, we say the westerly winds move air masses across our country. It normally takes about 3 to 5 days for an air mass to move across the country. So if we go ahead and we're looking at the weather and we want to know what the weather is probably going to be here on Long Island tomorrow, then we can kind of look at what the weather is looking like in Pennsylvania or Ohio today, because that is going to blow through our area. Okay, they move from a southwest to a northeast direction or a west to east direction because of the westerly winds that blow across our country. All right, so that's how fronts, okay, which stands for the front of an air mass, causes a little bit of stormy weather, okay, as it moves across our country, pulling across nice weather that we find in our air masses or our air bubbles that we've discussed before, okay, and it blows from west to east across our country. And that's why the weather changes the way it does. Stormy weather for a day or two, nice weather for a couple days. Stormy weather for a day or two because of the fronts, nice weather for a couple days because of the air buildup underneath the air masses. Cool bones? All right.